What is up, guys? This is John, aka Pokemon, and I am here with Chris to bring you guys the Week 4 Power Rankings for the GBA D-League. Chris, what are the Power Rankings?
It's this thing where you and I talk for a while, and then we're like, no, I disagree with you. And then you're like, no, you're wrong. And then eventually, somehow, it turns into a list where we're like, this guy's better than this guy.
That is very true. Opinions on we are smarter than you guys collectively. And that's what the Power Rankings are. We are going to rank the teams, not based completely on record, not based completely on play, not on their team, not on that. All of those things combined into what we think the best team is to the worst team. Nothing against anyone. You know, everyone just has to pick a spot. And number one is pretty easy. You know, there's someone who's undefeated. There's someone who's averaging over a 3-0 every battle. And that is the real Miguel. So,
yeah, he's kind of crushing it. And, you know, this week was his match against George and the San Francisco 49ers, which were the only other undefeated team up until this week. Obviously, two undefeated teams. Someone has to come out a winner. And it was Miguel. He played a better game. He had a rough start at the beginning, but overall, he played for the long game the right way, which is a consistent theme we've seen him run throughout the season. And it's also fits his general play style. Miguel is a guy that plays for the end of the match. And if you play for the end of the match, usually you're going to be the guy that wins at the end of the match. That's just a persistent thing that generally happens in the format. And Miguel seems to be exemplifying it.
Yeah, Miguel he's just a great player, and that's what with him, he just knows so much about the game. He knows so much about all the different mons. It's just, you know, he was able to overcome an early he lost his, you know, MVP right away, but he was able to come back. He played for the end game like he always has, and it's just he knows what he's doing. He knows what he has to kill. He knows what he has to save, and he knows what he's going to do. He kind of got a little cheeky with spikes on the Greninja. I felt like that was a little unnecessary, and that was more for some flair, and that it kind of cost him the Greninja, but even doing that and even trying to, you know, do something sneaky and something different, he's still able to pull a really big win against a team that was on fire. And it's just, there's not much else to say. I don't see Miguel losing for a while. I would be surprised if anyone can really give him a close match until George again, and he still beat George 3-0, so he might just go undefeated. I don't know. It's right now, unless he really stumbles, I just don't see anyone beating him.
I mean, it's a thing in the format. Any week, anyone can win anything. That's part of the nature of Pokemon in general, and any game that relies on RNG and things like that. But Miguel's definitely set himself up in a position to be the guy that it's going to be a big deal when someone finally does beat him.
That is very true, and he is actually a few wins away from just locking himself in as a playoff spot, because right now the best that Roger and Gary could be is 5-3. So if Miguel gets 2 more wins, he's already locked in as a playoff team, and that is huge. That's so huge. He has to just go 50% in the next few battles. He doesn't play Adam, the other top seed. He doesn't play George until week 8, so he has at least 3 battles against teams that are at best 500 in the record. He is going to be in the playoffs. I am pretty damn confident about that.
Yeah, I think his conference is fairly locked in, honestly. Going into the number 2 spot, George, San Francisco 49ers, number 2, and they're 3-1. That's still really good. A +8 differential is still very good at this point, and those 2 teams are just significantly ahead of the other 2 teams in their conference, because George has been playing great. George obviously lost this week. He made a lot of very silly, dumb mistakes. He knows the mistakes he made. If you go watch his video, he does a very good job of explaining his mistakes.
Yep.
And I think if anything else, it's a really good example of someone who's not going to make the same mistakes.
And not only that, like, he took the loss in stride. This is someone who was undefeated, he got 2 5-0s the first 2 weeks. And, you know, sometimes you get that first loss and it's hard, especially against an undefeated team, someone in your conference. He took the loss and said, I'm not losing again. Now, whether or not that's going to be true, I don't really care about. Just the fact that he's going to take a loss, a pretty substantial loss, too. A 3-0 is, you know, that's a pretty good loss. And he's going to say, never going to make these mistakes again. I did this wrong. I did that wrong. No more. I'm not going to lose again. I'm going to put more time in every week. And that's what you got to do. You know, you can't, there's going to be losses. Everyone's going to lose. It's Pokemon, you know. I could get into a battle. I don't remember how long ago it was, but I remember watching a Pokemon video. He uploaded it and he got crit, I think it was 6 or 7 times in a row and lost. I mean, you always have a chance to win, even if, you know, it's some bullshit hacks. You just can't give up. You just got to get back to the next battle and, you know, try your hardest.
Yep.
So, you know, with those two, I mean, they're both doing well. You know, one of them is undefeated. The other one has lost the undefeated guy. So, I think it's time to move on to the only other guy who is above 500, Adam.
Yep, the Anaheim Mighty Ducklets in at number 3. Had, you know, a rough week there for a little while.
But again, they only have lost to the undefeated guy. So it's a common theme.
This is true. This is true, you know. Adam's one loss was to, again, fairly unarguably the best team in the league. It was also a very dumb loss on his part because he had the keys to win it, and we will never let him live that down or forget it.
No, never. Never, never, never.
But he's done a pretty good job. This week was pretty straightforward, clean 4-0 sweep through. You know, he brought the right things, he executed the right way, and he won. That's all you have to do. You don't have to put up, you know, massive 5-0 sweeps. You don't have to run super niche sets and EVs. You don't have to be tricky with what you're doing. You just got to play and win, and that's what Adam did. Adam's seemed, you know, it's hard to tell because he doesn't have videos up whether, you know, it was so much playing for differential or anything like that, but he seems to have taken that bit to heart, and he's trying to put up bigger numbers based off the stats and everything, much more conservative about what he was willing to sack to get the win, which is good. You know, that big +4 has bumped him up a lot. And their conference, which is the exact opposite of the Hoenn conference, the Sinnoh conference, is very, you know, middle of the pack. There are 3 teams that could all very easily be the 2 that go to the playoffs. Adam's still entirely within range to get knocked out. So being a guy that not only is playing for the win, but is trying to boost his points up to secure if there is a tie in the win-loss record, it's a good move. It's a good play.
Yeah, I mean, he's at +5, which is pretty good, especially since he came in at +1 last week. A big 4-0, that's really going to help him. I definitely expect him to look back and, you know, look at that and be like, thank God I preserved it. I mean, we don't know. It's hard when people aren't getting videos up, but, you know, everyone's busy. I understand that. So I'm just going to imagine that the 4-0, he really did his best to conserve it, and that's what we want to see, especially since there's 2 teams in this conference that are 2-2, and, you know, anyone can get a win. They're great players. They could just knock Adam off, but I think 2 more wins and he might run away with it. It depends on who plays. You know,
all of the rest of Adam's matches are in conference, so he's in a great position to specifically control his fate more so than a lot of other people. The fact that the first 2 matches of the season for him were his 2 out of conference matches really means he was able to, you know, like I said, he can control it. He can directly push people's numbers up and down to where they need to be. It is going to be a big thing. He has to play Sam twice in the last 3 weeks here. The 6th and 8th weeks. So the outcomes of those matches are probably going to be huge deciders for that conference.
And that's definitely something to look out for. If you don't follow Adam, I would just for that reason. He is 100% in control of getting into the playoffs. If he gets those wins, he deserves to be there. And if he loses, he doesn't deserve to be there. Those are the biggest games. The interconference, they're stressful, but if you can get them done, it's going to be a lot easier. And he's going to be battling one of those 3 teams, most likely one of the 2 teams, the Slow Bros or Newcastle United, in the playoffs too. So he's going to have to beat them and then beat them, or at least one of them, again in the playoffs if he wants to do well. And that might be the hardest part. So this is actually going to be really interesting.
It's a real gauntlet. He's got to, you know, play Demo again this week and then potentially play him again in the playoffs, or, you know, beat Sam the week after that, and then beat Sam again the last week of the season, and potentially again beat Sam the first week of the playoffs.
which
it's rough.
I think that's a good segue into number 4. The surprising, not the surprising, but the big jump up for Mr. Sam. Newcastle United coming in at number 4. Now, Sam is still 2-2 at -6, but he's coming off of 2 very impressive wins. Now, they're not wins against, the best players, or the players with the best records, but, he's definitely doing a lot of things that we didn't see him do in the beginning. He finds his win condition and he saves it, and then he wins with it. He's learning how to use Mega Pincer, which last year in the GBA Season 2, that was the thing with the most kills. He has the tools, he's finally using them, and it looks like he's really finding his, I guess you could say, sea legs, whatever you want to say, for this league, but he's still at -6. So this is another guy who really needs to start working on it, because if Demo gets a few wins, Sam gets a few wins, they tie, there is almost no chance Sam is going to make the playoffs with that -6 differential. He's going to have to do a lot of work, and he's going to have to get a lot of wins.
Yeah, not only is he going to have to keep the wins up, they need to start being bigger wins. Thankfully, I think Sam has the team structure for that. It's a thing we talked about in the draft analysis and early on, just by far the bulkiest, most, livable team in the league probably. And then when you pair that with just the pure offensive Mega Pincer, that's a team set up for that. It's a team set up for a war of attrition approach.
Look at Gubbs.
He should just be able to come in. Yeah, exactly. It's the same thing Gubbs did, last season with that. Just bulky things with recovery and the ability to not die that can slowly over a match wear everything down, and then have Pincer come in when they're too low to do anything about it. Pincer's just great for that cleanup work, and it's great for bumping up your differential later in the match and in the season. So I think Sam's in a very good spot at number 4 to do well with that.
I definitely agree, and I feel like we just need to hop to number 5, because Demo, the coach of the Cleveland Slowbros, talking about him and Sam, they're going to go together because those two are fighting for the last playoff spot. Now, they could actually both, do really well, beat Adam, and then take his spot as well, but
yep, it's entirely still possible.
We definitely need to see this week and how it goes, because if Demo loses, then it's really going to be Demo v Sam. But if Demo wins, then Adam's going to get thrown into the mix, and it's going to be really exciting. I honestly, for the sake of watching and seeing what happens with the playoff race, I hope Demo beats Adam. That would be pretty exciting, just to see everyone, every match being that much more every single week.
Yeah, I really think that conference is going to come down to week 8, though, as to who the final 3
Yes.
are going to be.
I definitely agree with that. But now with Demo, he's coming off of 2 straight losses. He started the season off really strong, surprised a few people, and now he's just had a few close losses. And the reason he's below Sam, he has a better differential, he has some bigger wins than Sam, it's that he keeps forfeiting at the end of the match. And that's not really allowed in the GBA. Now, his forfeits haven't affected anything, so it hasn't been a problem. But that's just...
Well, it's only 1 forfeit and 1 mentally just giving up and letting things die.
Yeah.
And he's been warned about the forfeit as of last week and told not to do it anymore. If he does, we'll have to step in and do something about it. But yeah, it's a bad mental state to be in. This is one you and I argued about a lot. This was really the bulk of the discussion for when we were figuring out the ratings. And, this is primarily John's project for the D League. So I said, we'll go to your list and I'll just voice my dissent when we get to that.
Very fair.
So I'll go ahead and do that now. I wanted to have Demo a lot lower. I believe that the forfeit and the quitting thing is a mental stigmatism. And it's a thing that will really mess you up. If you come into a match thinking you're going to lose, you're going to lose. If you come into a match with the mindset that as soon as something goes wrong or doesn't go your way, and then you just constantly make mistakes, that's an incredibly difficult thing to come out of. It's one thing to lose to a better player. It's another thing to lose to yourself. It's a much harder battle to overcome your own mental problems and weaknesses than it is to overcome the strengths of another team. And that's why I was going to put Demo a lot lower than this, because that's what you see most people fail to. In the long-running schemes of life, I think more people struggle with overcoming their own mental issues than they do making the right plays. Demo inherently has some of the best instincts that I've ever seen in anyone that does Pokemon battling. When he's on his game and he's making predictions, he's up there with Nick and just a league of people who make the right prediction 90% of the time, which is really hard to do. It's super easy to look at something and overpredict or underpredict. But in my experience, when he's on point, Demo does that extremely well. However, you know, when something bad happens, like this week, he took too long to make a decision. The timer ran out, and it automatically brought a slow bro in when he didn't need to have a slow bro in. He mentally fell apart. I mean, he fell apart, and the game was just downhill after that. And that was on that third turn of the battle. You know, that's, if you can't recover from a mistake on the third turn of the battle, it's going to be a really rough season for you. And that's why I kind of wanted to put him lower, because I think that's a bigger obstacle to overcome than the obstacle some of the other people are having. Granted, if he does overcome that, he does deal with his, you know, hang-ups about losing or making mistakes, and, you know, figures out that ability to shake it off and just get back into the match, he's going to be a major threat to everyone every week. But it's a concern of mine, and it's one I personally put a lot of stock and value into.
And I completely understand that. The only reason I argue that he should be higher is, I mean, we'll get into the people below him, but I feel like there's a few things holding them back from them being above him. And he has two quality wins, as Chris alluded to. He's not a fool. I mean, he knows Demo is incredible, and his concerns are very legitimate. Now, I think Demo could be anyone. He comes up with these teams that are just really good. He really sees some things that some people don't. He makes predictions that a lot of people just can't do. He's really good at the game. He doesn't have as much knowledge about all the different Pokemon, all the different these and that's, all that shit that everyone has.
He's not great at, you know, estimating the calcs off the top of his head or anything, but
it's just the natural instincts, and I think
it's instinct and aptitude.
Yeah. He's a smart guy, and the thing is, that mistake with the timer that, you know, in his mind cost him the game, that's not going to happen again. Because he's no, if that really bothered him that badly, he's never going to let that ever happen again. Now, is Demo going to be able to overcome his, you know, mental problems, think he's going to lose? I don't know. I really don't know, but I want to give him one more week. If next week he just gives up, he doesn't think he can win this or that, then he's going to be at the bottom of the barrel, because that's just not the attitude you need to have. I mean, he had two really impressive wins. He's a great player. He's a great team, and he's really doing some great things. And even the battles he's lost, you know, he's had a chance. He's just given up. I mean, remember when he played Adam? I don't think he had much of a chance, but he still had a chance. He just, this didn't happen. My calc was wrong. You were adamant. Nope. If he can overcome those things, I think he's going to be at the top. If he can't, then he's going to be at the bottom. It's kind of sad because, you know, as a commentator, someone who's watching it, you really want to see, you know, even when times are tough, just to go through it, because at the worst, Demo should be 500, and that's like at the absolute worst. But if he gives up, it could get real bad. So I'm going to give him one more week. I think he can really have a strong outing. I mean, even if he loses, I think as long as he just comes back and he's playing the way that he used to play, he still has a really strong chance to make the playoffs. And I hope he can get back to that. But we've talked about him enough. It's time to talk about Lumberjack Gary at number 6. The Detroit Luxray, first week in the league, 1 win.
Yep.
He's 1-0 right now.
He is 1-0. Unfortunately, it wasn't a huge jump up for him, even though he was beating Demo, who is, like we've said, is obviously a good team. I wasn't as impressed just because I know Demo's mental state coming into it. So I was like, well, Gary beat someone who beat themselves. Yeah. Which is not to knock Gary, because Gary didn't make wrong plays that match.
He had a great game.
Made the right plays for every situation, you know. It was just, I think, very straightforward. But, you know, the match lent itself to a straightforward approach. So for all I know, Gary was just, you know, feeding off of that and, you know, doing the right thing that way.
Yeah, but, and Gary's someone who could honestly hop up the list every single week. If he gets another list, if he gets another win, I would not be surprised to see him in the top 4.
If he wins this week, he's up against Miguel.
Yeah.
So if he's the man that knocks the biggest guy in the yard on his ass in his first day, you know, in his second day of prison, as it were,
he might legitimately go to number 1 if he could do that, depending on his win. And I'm not saying that's going to happen, but he's someone to look out for. Even a loss to Miguel, depending how close it was, how well he prepared, how well he played, he's going to keep going up the list. I mean, if you look at it, the guy below him has the same record as him, but, you know, that guy's had 4 chances to get a win. He only has 1. Gary's 1 for 1. I mean, he could lose the next 3, but we'll get there when we get there. Right now, Gary is playing well. We can't say much about him because, you know, he's only beaten one person, like played one thing, but definitely look to see Gary hop up the list. I really think he can do it. I mean, and he just hopped right in the middle of the season with a team he didn't do or didn't make, and you know, he did pretty well.
Yeah, came in his first week, got a win. That's literally the most you can ask for, short of a 6-0 sweep.
Exactly. I mean, especially with a team that had just gone 0-3. So, you know, who's to say it's the team's fault that's doing it? Maybe, you know, maybe it was Frank, but for Frank's benefit, we'll say it's the team.
Very rarely the draft, unless the draft is just incredibly horrible.
Okay, it was Frank.
There's such a plethora of Pokemon to choose from. Even, you know, in like the main GBA where you have a much larger roster and things like that, and you're dealing with 12 teams or however many teams of 11 Pokemon, there are still over 700 Pokemon to pick from. You would have to draft very poorly to not have some chance every week.
With that being said, Mr. Gary, expect to see him go up. We got to go on to number 7. Sad to say, Roger Rabbit Denver Bronzongs. Now, this is one of the ones that we argued. Now, me and Chris went back and forth with Demo and Roger, so I'm going to say my piece with Roger. Now, I think Roger is an incredible battler. I really do. But right now, he is just, you know, it might sound mean. I don't really care. He's bad at the GBA. When we came in, I was getting so sick and tired of it. Every goddamn player in this league would come to me, and every time I would rank teams above other ones, I'd be, that guy's great at battling, though. I don't give a shit if you're good at battling in the Smogon format. It doesn't mean you're good at this, like, battling the GBA style. It's so much different. So many different things happen. And right now, Roger's not doing anything he needs to do except for cutting the differential when he's already lost a match. The only thing he's done so far is beat the team that's 0-4 and make sure he doesn't lose by a lot. Now, I think Roger has all the tools. He's a great battler. He makes some great sets, and he does this and this, but you can't be playing from behind. You can't be sacking off your win condition. You can't be like, oh, Mega Pinsir, I have Weavile. That's a great check. Never mind, let's sack it to a return. That play defines Roger's season. And what does that say about Roger? I don't even know. I cannot even imagine what was going through his head when he thought, let's switch Weavile in on Mega Pinsir's return. Maybe he was predicting something. It's another thing he's done. He's over-predicted multiple times every match. And in the GBA, playing safe is actually one of the better ways to play in a lot of situations because you need to save a specific thing. You make a team to beat someone else's team. You know what they have. You know what you have. You know what you need to beat them. There's no surprises. I mean, there can be surprises, but you know what they can bring. You know what those pokes can do. So, if you have Weavile and he has a Mega Pinsir, if Mega Pinsir's going to run through your team, you have Ice Shard, you're going to be able to possibly kill it. You know, the Calyx, maybe your Sash, I don't know. Like, just don't switch it in. You have other things. I mean, he kind of got screwed. He went for a Scald instead of the Ice Beam on the Mega Pinsir. The Calyx said he had a 50% chance to kill. You know, he could have gotten the burn. You know, he could have switched the Infernape in. And that's just, maybe he's unlucky too. You know, there's a lot of things going into it. I think Roger's going to have a strong second half of the season. He's had a lot of almost wins against some good players, but almost is not good enough at all, and Roger really needs to learn to find his win condition, save it, and beat someone that is not the 0-4 team.
Yeah, and John makes incredibly good points. My only counter argument for this was that, again, I put a lot of investment into the mental attitude and thing that when Roger's not out, unless he has literally gotten to the point where it is a mathematic certainty that he has lost the match, he is still playing a numbers game, and I really respect that. I think it's really important. Obviously, your differential isn't going to matter if you don't get the wins, and that's ultimately why you got to agree, you know, Roger does belong down here. However, I still think it's worth note and merit that Roger is a guy who is at the point in his GBA understanding where he is making those conscious decisions. You know, afterwards he was talking about it, and you know, he got down on himself and he was like, oh, I choked at the end, blah blah blah, and it really wasn't a choke. You know, he had sound logic. It was Milotic in against Mega Pinsir. There was Snorlax in the back for Roger and Infernape in the back for Sam. From the range he was at, it was a little bit over a 50-50 roll as to whether Scald would kill the pincer. However, Scald would guarantee a kill if Sam tried to play safe and switch in Infernape to get differential, because earlier on the Mega Pincer, Roger had obviously gone for the Ice Beam. Add into that the chance for a burn with a Scald on Mega Pincer. It was mathematically more likely that Roger would come out with a 1-0 loss if he went for Scald than if he went for Ice Beam. However, obviously, it's a dice roll, so he got that very low. And I mean, we're talking maybe...
It was 1 HP.
We're talking, it was less than a 20% chance that it wasn't going to KO or burn.
Yeah.
You know? Like, either one of those things would have guaranteed it. And that's unfortunate, but he still made what I consider to be the right decision in that moment. However, like John said, it was too little too late. Unfortunately, Roger is from Showdown background, and in my opinion, Showdown is traditionally just a more hyper offensive setting. The animations and everything lead to quicker, more, deliberate, fast decisions, not less thought out, but just it's a quicker paced game when you play on Showdown than it is on Wi-Fi. And I think that's what we're seeing here, and that's, Sam calls him out in the narration. Roger plays hyper offense.
Yeah.
And you can win in this format with hyper offense. It's entirely possible.
Oh my god, yeah. But you
Nick,
don't want people to know that's how you play.
That's how Nick won the finals last season.
It's very true. I didn't see it coming. That wasn't Nick, and it worked because that's just not what I saw coming.
But it's not the most consistent style to win with by a large margin.
No.
And so far, it's really the only style we've seen Roger bring, which isn't to say it's the only style he can play. He can definitely play other styles.
Well, that's one thing to bring up,
to.
though. You bring up Nick and his hyper offense, and the reason Nick's hyper offense was able to work is because he brought the most hyper offensive, one of the most hyper offensive Pokemon on his team, Deoxys Speed, and made it completely max defensive, and that's what won him the game. I don't think many people would have ever seen it coming. I didn't see it coming. I brought Sticky Web because I thought he might bring hyper offense, and I was like, oh, Deoxys Speed, let's neutralize that. Gets up a screen, he has max defense, I can't do shit. That's the difference. Roger's just bringing straight hyper offense. It's sack, sack, sack. As you said, Showdown, really quick pace. I mean, Showdown, in a Wi-Fi battle, you can do like 6 Showdown battles by the time you're done this one Wi-Fi. Yeah. So, like, it's, it's quick. Probably you'll go 5-1 in that, span. But here, you can't go 5-1. Yeah, you can go 0-1 if you're going fast-paced in this one battle, and then by the next week, do the same thing. I really think Roger's going to be one of the best. He's one of my favorite players in this league because of his positive attitude. I really like how he just, I really like his playstyle. I like the sets he brings. I like a lot of things he does. And I'm being a little harsh on him because I know he can do better, and you can't have biases. I'm not saying Chris has one, but, I don't want to be the mean guy, but I'm just going to be frank. He's playing bad. He's not playing how you should, and I think Roger should do better. If Roger was 5-3 by the end of the season, I would not be surprised. He has the tools. He has the team. He has the smarts. He can do it. Will he turn it around? I don't know. Right now I say watch out for him next season, and this is where he's going to really learn how to play. Next season, he's going to be really good. Maybe the second half of the season, he'll be really good. But it's going to have to click sometime. And, maybe he'll watch this.
He's going to have to make that conscious decision at some point. Okay, what I'm doing isn't working. I have to look at an alternate way to come at this. And I think he can do it, but I also think you're right. He hasn't done it yet. And at this point, it's probably too late in the season for it. Not necessarily, but it looks like it.
Yeah, I mean, if he can, I think he's playing George. If he can get a big win against George, he's back in it. But,
it's got to be a big win.
He's going to have to get a big win.
Because George is his target for catching up and making it into the playoffs.
And George is angry.
He needs to beat George, which still isn't going to put him in the win-loss. And it needs to be a big win because he's got to take a huge chunk out of George's significantly higher differential and bump up his noticeably low differential.
Yeah, and moving on to the last person, this will probably be short. I think John Origins is a great player. I think he's also a great GBA player. He's had a ton of, he's had a ton of really close losses. He's been in every match except for the last one. It kind of seems like John's given up, and I really don't blame him. There's someone like that every season. And it's kind of unfortunate. He's 0-4. He's -9. He doesn't have much of a chance of making the playoffs. He still does, if he can string along some wins. But it seems like John may have given up on the season. I don't want to see that, but from all the things, he hasn't uploaded a battle. He just got 4-0'd after not losing more than 2-0 any match. So, might be the end of John. I think he has everything in him to do better, and I just hope he sticks around and does better next season, or just, you know, turns it on the second half of the season. Now, I could be wrong. I didn't see the battle. Maybe Adam just crushed him because Adam's awesome. But I'm gonna, from what I've heard and what I'm guessing, I think John's kind of giving up at this point. He's pulling a Kyle. He's Kyleing it. He's Kyle.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to put any words or stigmatism on the man. You know, I don't want to assume he's giving up because he might not. You know, I don't want to put that out there for him. I just want, like, he is a good battler. Obviously, you had to be a good battler to make it in through the tourney and everything like that. He's got a good team. We said in the draft, I don't really understand his team, but it's not a bad team.
No. Yeah.
And I think this is more of it. Like, when I see the things he brings, I don't understand it. I'm sure you have a thought process, but I don't understand it. And then it doesn't work. And I mean, that's all it is. It's like, I don't know what he's doing, and none of his results are showing that, you know.
It's a new format, you know.
Yeah, none of his results are showing that he is doing something right that I don't understand. At this point, he's just doing things wrong that I don't understand. So
yeah, and I mean, I really hope we see him come back. You know, I haven't gotten to see any of his battles. None of us know his thought process, so hopefully that'll change. Hopefully we'll, you know, maybe he'll upload and we'll be able to see what he was thinking, where he is. But just like Roger, I think he has everything to, you know, have a strong second part of the season. I really think he can. It's just whether or not he wants to, because it's going to be hard to make the playoffs in the spot he is. It's not impossible. You know, it's still there. It's just really hard. And once you get in that spot where you don't have much of a chance, you might as well just go for the best draft pick, you know. It's, you know, I don't know what he's thinking. I can't speak for him. I can just theorize and tell you guys what I think, and I could be very wrong. And, you know, everything we said could be very wrong. You know, Miguel could be 4-4 by the end of this. John could be 4-4, and John could win the entire thing. I don't fucking know.
Entirely possible.
Yeah, you know, but that is, that's the end of the video. So I hope you guys did enjoy. If you did, leave a like and leave your list down below if you think we were wrong on something. If you think that I was wrong and Chris was right with the Demo Roger thing, go for it. You know, tell me why I was wrong and vice versa. It's fun. We'd love to respond to those comments. But, Chris, unless you have something else to say, I think that's about it.
No, we done.